Having a happy and a good childhood is that so many people treasure the most in the world. But I can say the opposite. I never had a such happy and a good childhood of my own. You may understand why. And for most of that, is it because of my complete insane toxic parents? You may understand in the end why, but some may simply say, how can you say that your parents are toxic and insane? Well, you may understand eventually. My name is Thomas, by the way. I'm 26, but this all happened when I was only 18 years old. I will give you a brief backstory why I will say that my childhood was bad and very unhappy. I was born to a wealthy family and also the only child. I lived in this upper class neighborhood. Most people told me that I probably would given all the most recent things like video games, comics, even other things I wanted to have. But I was far from it. The reason is that I never had any comic books or even video games. Both my parents were such strict people, they told me that I would only get much distractions from, well, things in the future life. I was like, well, even if I did have comic books in my room, hide them somewhere, if they found it, they probably scold me and I was probably would be grounded. So I never did. And even though I was little, I went to this private daycare and even had a private tutor when I was in elementary and even middle school. But when I was reaching high school age, I wanted to go to a public school for once. When I asked my parents, almost like begging, well, they very much allowed me to go. I was stunned. But the reason is why is that they wanted me to improve my social skills, and they told me that could be much very useful when I was growing up. And I was like very happy. But my freedom of happiness and of high school was shattered. Even despite having gone to public school, there were some limitations. Of course, I was expecting that. One of them is that I had to go home after school right away so that I can do some chores, homework, and of course, I wasn't allowed to date. When I asked that, that would also give me as much distractions from doing my supposed homework. And I was like, well, that's just a bummer. But at least I was going to be allowed to go to a public high school. But they didn't stop me from making friends because that is a part of doing social skills. I got plenty of friends at this school, and a guy named Simon who became my best friend. We were not the same age. Well, he was only a few months younger than me though, but still the same age. But around the same time, I was actually introduced to this girl named Lucy. I fell in love with her almost immediately. But it took me a while, but even with Simon's help, to the courage to ask her. But the thing is, we couldn't do any such dating at all. If my parents found out that I actually broke one of the rules, it's a very likely they would have pulled me out from the high school and put me at a private high school or even homeschool once again. So me and Lucy decided to keep it a secret. And since we couldn't actually dating, we spent our lunch break as our official days, like enjoying lunch as some sort of romantic dinner dates. And when we were during the lunch break, we were just talking and we did hold hands and do some kissing and all that some normal couples do. But it was one of the most peaceful times. But that was a part of the brief backstory. The main story happened around when I was 18, like I said in the beginning. And that happened around the year 2015. And boy, it was the most shocking news that my parents had for me. One evening, I was having dinner with my parents, and my dad told me that he had some news for me. I asked him what kind of news. Well, it turned out that both my parents had set me up for an arranged marriage with the daughter of a man who was an old friend of my dad. I was stunned, even though I just had turned 18 only about a few months earlier, and I was going to finish high school earlier later this before summer of this year. And another thing is that they want me to go to college. And now I was set up for arranged marriage with the daughter of the man that was a friend of my dad. I was stunned. But I knew it was bad not to argue about it, so I just said, alright, and if I going to meet her anytime soon, just, get to know her. He nodded, and he actually told me that I was going to go out with her on a date the next day after school. But I told him, what about my strict rules of getting home right after school? But he told me that I was actually given having this permission. And it turned out this girl didn't even go to the same public school as me. She was in a different high school, a public one. So that makes sense. So she was going to be at my high school the next day afternoon. And of course, when I went to school the next day, I told this to Simon and to Lucy. Both were stunned, and even Lucy was horrified that I was going to fall for this other girl. But I told her, I'm not going to. Because we have been together since the first year of high school, so for almost about 4 years, and it's not likely I would. So, but not to make my parents so upset, so I told her I was going to meet her, this girl, and it turned out she was a beautiful girl, but to me, Lucy is the most beautiful. And her name was Jane. Jane and I was, well, we were a similar personality and similar common interests, but that's pretty much it. And even though we did get to hang out together at the cafe that we chose to go to, turned out she didn't want to have this marriage either. She was actually even had a boyfriend herself, but she never told her parents about it because she probably would not been allowed to have it. And I did mention this myself that that's just terrible. But I never did mention to Jane that I had a girlfriend because just for privacy. So me and Jane pretended that we were actually starting to get to know each other better. But after time, it's only worth you mention it. It never did happen, of course. Even though that Lucy sometimes did ask me at school if I started falling for this Jane girl, but I told her not to worry. But another thing is that the college my parents wanted me to go to was this college that my dad went to because since he opened his own small company shortly after he went to college, he wanted me to go to for business part of that college or something. But I did apply for college. I did. But not the same one that he went to. When I told him that I applied for college, he was excited, but I didn't tell him that I had just applied and I will be getting an answer back soon. When I did get the response back from college and said I was accepted in, it was of course this school that I want to go to. And of course, I lied to my parents that I had been accepted into college, and they literally took me out for dinner to celebrate it. And I, of course, had thrown away my paper to show them that I wouldn't been lied out. Of course, as high school's end was getting closer, I was getting more and more nervous about this because eventually I would have gone to college and married this Jane if I wasn't find out a way out of it. But after talking to my friend Simon, he managed to convince me to get help. But who can I ask for help? Someone I could trust? Well, the only person I could think of was my uncle, my dad's younger brother, Ronald. He was actually married and he was a very successful rich man and had his own IT company. And I was like, yeah, and I really had a good relationship with my uncle. So I reached out to him when I was home alone and told him about this. he was stunned that my parents are trying to set up me for this arranged marriage. He actually knew about me and Lucy, but he had promised to keep it a secret. Well, my dad and my uncle were not much very close, so it was no risk for him to spill the beans anyways. But the thing is, Thomas, Simon, and I, and with help of my uncle Ronald, is that we were going to go in there after high school was over. Since I didn't have much personal belongings, my room was basically almost empty. I only had a bookshelf and some books and a bookshelf and a desk with a computer on it, but that's pretty much it. So it wouldn't be much for me to just pack up things. And after college, the high school was over, I actually convinced Lucy go there to go see my to live with my uncle, and her parents was no problem, since her family was rich and her themselves. So it wouldn't much be any problem. They trusted me. So after high school was over, since I told my parents that I wanted to be taken a, just to take the last of the summer vacation before going to college, which they actually accepted. Because around the time when I was finished high school, they decided to go on this vacation time for themselves for about a month. So during the time, me and Lucy, we took her car and we drove all the way to Oregon where my uncle lived, and he opened his home, welcomed us both of us to live at his place, open arms, and I stayed there until college started. And of course, I will find out a way to get my own place with Lucy. Around the time when college started, I actually was very happy to live there, and even though Lucy didn't go to college herself, but she just started working as a part-time job in town, and I was happy about it. But there was around 6 months after I started college when I get a phone call from my parents. They yelled at me that they found out I was not at the college that I they wanted me to go to. They demanded to know which college I were at, but I told them that's not their personal, that's not their business anymore. I told them I was living in a different state by now, and they told me to come home and marry the girl that I wanted, that they set me up for, which were Jane. But I told them I refused, since I'm 18 and I can do things I wanted to do now. I told them, I told them that, and they pretty much told me they would disown me and remove me from the will, and they thought that would make me go senses and to go home. But I had to tell. I started laughing like I almost, if I had, well, it was the most funniest things I ever heard. It's like that, the most funniest joke. I was laughing about it, and I said, I would be gladly being disowned by the most toxic, insane people that I used to know. I told them not to worry about the money, since Lucy's family is rich and that her dad is the founder and the CEO of Starlight Construction Company in our which would be our hometown's largest building company. That made my dad furious that I had broken his trust and I was supposed to marry Jane, but I told him I never had any attention. I even told him that I was already engaged with Lucy since, well, during my third year of high school. Which is true. I did propose to her during my third year, when she said yes. But we kept it most a secret, and of course I never did wear any ring because, well, I didn't have the money for her to do that. But, well, after that, I just hang up the phone call and blocked both my parents' number, and that's pretty much it. I informed my uncle and Lucy about it, and they both laughed about it, that I was going to be disowned. But since, but my uncle said that he would support me financially also, and and I did tell my uncle after I finished college, I will start working with his company, which he actually happy to hear. So Eventually, I did finish college, and I did get a job of my uncle's business, and, well, I was happy about it. And 2 years after I did finish college, me and Lucy finally tied the knot. We got married. We had this big, pumpy wedding. Of course, we invited her family and some friends back home. Thomas, I invited actually invited Simon to be my best man. After all, he was the best friend I ever had. If he had even suggested to reach out to my uncle or somehow, I pretty much wouldn't have been here to now. But yeah, today to now though. But we were just happy, and my uncle, along with my new future and then my new parents-in-law, they arranged that we could go to Hawaii or Paris for honeymoon, which we chose Hawaii, and it was the best times ever. And 2 years later, after we got married, we were blessed with our first child. But we later learned it wasn't just one, but we were expecting twins, a boy and a girl. We decided to name the boy Lucas and the girl Bella. Of course, we had asked Simon to be both the twins' godfather, which he, with big tear-filled eyes, said yes. Which, I mean, who would it not be better than a godfather than my best friend of all? Well, I mean, I was just happy to hear that. And, and during this time, though, none of the time my parents had even tried to reach out to me, which I was pretty happy not to hear these voices or even see their faces. I did ask my uncle if he had heard anything from my parents during the time, and he said yes. But he only denied that he didn't want to have nothing to do with them because he had also cut ties with them. And but only a few years later, I think it was maybe just 1 year after the twins was born, my parents tried to reach out to me. Of course, I ignored the calls multiple times, but until one day I had enough. They called me constant. They tried to call me so many times, and eventually I just tired and I picked up the phone, and it was my dad asking me for help for the company. But I told him, well, how can I help you? Because I'm not part of the family anymore since you disowned me years ago, and I'm not even your son. You said that personally. And it turned out that his company had been suffering a little bit of very some losses over the years, and now his company was on the line of being bankruptcy. And he did ask me, since I was working for my uncle and had a very such strong income, and also has some connection to my father-in-law, which has his own IT company, his company of the construction in town. And well, I told him no. I'm not going to use my connection to my father-in-law's connection, his company, and my own personal income, and I'm not going to even to ask my uncle for help. And that made him furious and like, you are my son, and you're supposed to help me. You were supposed to take over my company one day. I told him I had never intention to do that. And I told him I'm very happy with my new family, and I told him I considered my uncle as my father figure more than him. Because even since I was living with my parents from time to time, I did have a good conversation with my uncle. Sometimes he even came over with his family. I was happy. I could see how happy his family were. They were not that strict as mine. I was jealous of my cousin's family life. So, and I told him that that made my dad, well, at a rather correction, former dad, to lose his calm. He started yelling and demanded I come over, and he demanded I divorce Lucy so I can marry Jane or someone another girl that he will arrange for me to do. I can even hear my mom in the background saying the same thing, but I told him, you two are still the most toxic, insane people that I used to know. And you didn't even raise me well enough. I'm glad I never fell for your brainwashing techniques. I've made them lose their comms even more. So I told them, once again, if you ever try to reach out to me ever again, I will block the call right away. And by the way, after this call's over, I will block your call. So don't never attempt to reach out to me or my wife. And if they're trying to ask for Lucy's dad for help, don't bother. He is already aware of your behavior, and he would deny your assistance of any kind. So, to my former parents, please don't call me ever again. And after that, I hang the phone call and hang up and block the new number as well. I was, well, pretty much very happy that I stood my ground. And just imagine, if I actually have followed my parents' plans all those years ago, marrying Jane, I have no idea if I would even been happy. I would have been a puppet to my parents. But the question is, what would happen if my parents would have passed away? If they had passed away at some point, I would have been free, yes. But would I have been happy otherwise? No. I mean, I'm glad I never stood up for their beliefs that I should be their puppet or something. I did ask my uncle after that conversation, my last call with them, if he had ever heard anything from them. Well, from a mutual friend back home, it turned out my dad's company did end up bankrupt, so they had to move out from the pompous house that they used to live in and move to a smaller apartment. My dad, well, he and my mom actually ended up having to work in this small part-time jobs in order to keep themselves a living. Well, I'm glad that they realized what they're doing was eventually their own downfall. For that, I'm pretty happy I never fell for their brainwashing techniques all those years ago. And I'm very happy that at least one thing that was positive is when if they had even allowed me to go to this public high school, none of this would have happened. But so that was at least a good thing my former parents did. So I'm happy at least with that. But that doesn't mean I'm going to reach out to them ever again. And if it's my kids will be old enough, they want to ask me about their paternal grandparents, I will tell them the true story. And I will tell them it will be up to them if they want to talk to them, but unlikely. So to my former toxic, insane parents, stay away from us. Thank you.